Hello and welcome to Campaign Chronicles. With just 20 weeks to go until the first round of voting, this is France 24's regular update on what's happening ahead of the French presidential election. Coming up on today's show. When is a candidate not a candidate, and when should he pay the costs for campaigning? Right and left cross swords over voting rights for foreigners. But are they both playing to the gallery? And Faces and Places finds out that life's not too easy for entrepreneurs going solo, despite changes to the labour market. We begin, though, today with a roundup of the week's news. As the governing UMP party lurches to the right yet again, François Hollande tries to build himself some credibility on the global stage. And Nicolas Sarkozy, as a non-candidate who seems nonetheless to be campaigning, comes in for some criticism.
Nicolas Sarkozy on Thursday evening in the south of France. The French president's message: he has the answers to the current Eurozone crisis and his political opponents don't. His omnipresence continues to annoy the Socialist Party, especially because he hasn't yet officially thrown his hat into the ring. That means the bill for his thrice-weekly visits around the country are paid for by the taxpayer and not his party. And at about €90,000 each, the Socialists say that's an unfair advantage. The UMP say the president is just doing his job as head of state and won't be changing his timetable. His candidacy isn't expected until February at the earliest.
François Hollande is by no means resting on his laurels. His trip to Brussels this week was an opportunity to get himself known on the international scene. He decried the proximity between the French and German leaders' policies, calling the couple Merkozy.
For some months, it's been Mrs. Merkel who decides and Mr. Sarkozy who follows.
But closer to home, the socialist candidate is still struggling to impose his authority. Some of his closest allies have been forced out by the running for seats in Parliament by party boss Martine Aubry.
How far to the right is too far? Claude Guéant has become the UMP's go-to man to provoke debate and a hint of outrage. The Interior Minister this week said there were too many immigrants in France and that his ministry was going to target benefit fraud committed by foreigners. A stance that drew an ironic thank you from the leader of far-right National Front Party, Marine Le Pen.
And that supposed policy overlap is the tweet of the week. Manuel Valls, the socialist head of communications, has been drawing attention to the front page of the left-wing newspaper Libération. They say he's the voice of Marine Le Pen. Guéant's response: his views are nothing like the Front National's.
It is time now for a closer look at a campaign theme. Luke Brown is our Campaign Chronicles reporter and joins me now. Thanks for being with us. Luke, you're going to tell us about why the centre ground seems to be getting a little bit crowded.
Very crowded indeed. This week we had not one, not two, but three centrists vying for media space. If we take a look at them in a bit of a photo montage we've set up, physically we're going to be able to see that they are very similar. They've both all got grey hair, as you can see there, dark suits, and pretty much middle of the road, middle-aged too. They are centrists, so they are pretty similar politically, but their strategy at the moment is very different. Hervé Morin, you can see him there in the middle. He wants to weigh on the campaign. He's a small party candidate. He wants to weigh on the campaign by running, even though he has given his vote in when it comes to the crunch next year to Nicolas Sarkozy, the president. Jean-Louis Borloo on the right there. He insists that he wants to influence policy by not running from the outside. And François Bayrou, he's probably the best known, the one on the left there. He insists that the current crisis basically vindicates his diagnosis of what went wrong back in 2007, 2008. And so he is once again the man of the moment.
Now, what role, Luke, can these sort of middle ground men play?
It's very difficult for Hervé Morin, for him to assert himself. He's not that well known. His poll figures are well under 1%. But François Bayrou, he's going to be probably much more important. Back in 2007, he had 18%, came in at third. He's stuck at about 17% of voters at the moment. But there are still many do consider there is a bit of a reservoir of potential voters that could be cynically swung either left or right. That's why he's being wooed to a certain extent. François Hollande, the socialist candidate, said this week they can work together. We do know that Bayrou, he respects the socialist candidate. We also know he doesn't necessarily get on very well with the conservative president, Nicolas Sarkozy. That's something of a contradiction because, to be honest, politically he is much closer to the UMP party, and it is very clear that his deficit-cutting policies are something of an anathema to the left wing of the Socialist Party. Once again, though, he does demonstrate something of a paradox in French politics. At the moment, the two big parties, thanks to the crisis, they're being pushed towards their extremes. You'd think that would leave extra space in the centre, but nature, of course, abhors a vacuum. That means there may be the same amount of voters, but there are more candidates this time around. We don't necessarily know whether any one or any of them are going to capitalise on that extra space.
Luke Brown, thanks very much for that. We're going to take a look now at a theme that's already proving contentious in this presidential campaign: voting rights for foreigners. France has been slow compared to its European neighbours, and non-EU residents are still barred at all levels. Many say that demonstrates that the issue has been instrumentalised, and by both sides.
Mohammed, Ali and Abderrak have lived in France for much of their adult lives. They pay their taxes here, their children can vote here, but they can't. They say that's not fair.
I've lived here for 30 years, and a Lithuanian or a Pole can come to my town and after 6 months he's eligible to vote. For me that's a real injustice and real discrimination.
The issue has been a political football for 30 years. It was in François Mitterrand's presidential manifesto in 1981, but he backed off, saying the French weren't ready. Both socialists and conservatives have flip-flopped since, most notably President Nicolas Sarkozy. In 2005, he supported it.
I consider that the vote for town hall elections, for foreigners who've been here for 10 years, who respect our laws, who pay their taxes, whose paperwork is in order, it's a question that needs to be opened. I'm in favour.
But just last week, he changed his tune.
This is something that threatens to deeply divide the French. At exactly the moment we have to be united like never before.
The reason for that change of heart: this election will be fought on different battleground themes than the last.
He created an identity that was a rupture, including with the traditional values of his own side. Now he's going to have to bring together his camp. At the presidential palace, I think they consider they had to oppose this, even if that means this total U-turn.
The Conservative UMP party is playing to what it considers its core electorate. Over 3 decades of debate have shown the issue polarises French voters. Recent polls show a majority do back a change, but not UMP loyalists. Jacques Millard embodies that uncompromising wing of the Conservative Party.
If you want to become French, you have a right to vote. And this is why President Sarkozy realizes that if you want to assimilate, you want to integrate people, they have to act, they have to make a gesture.
But for moderate right-wingers such as Etienne Pat, that hardline stance means poaching themes and so votes from the far-right Front National.
I really regret that for purely electoral reasons, the president's opinion has changed.
The socialists, too, stand accused of instrumentalising the issue. As well as his role at the French Socialist Party, Malik Bouty is an anti-racism activist, leaving him well placed to observe the hypocrisy on both sides.
It gives the left the chance to take the moral high ground. We've given immigrants the right to vote, as if it were a revolution. And then it allows the right to brush over their own bad record in office. Foreigners are the scapegoat, thanks to the emptiness of the intellectual debate in France.
That as may be, but the issue remains symbolically charged. The left wants to use it to demonstrate their new dominance in the Senate next week. Unless they win next year's election, though, it won't go any further. And claims that it's being instrumentalised probably won't go away.
It is time now for Faces and Places. This week we're off to Marseille, our guide, another archetype of French traditions, the small-scale skilled craftswoman. But Karine also embodies a more modern trend. She's self-employed, making the most of measures introduced in 2008 to free up France's labour market. The government, though, still hasn't done enough to cut red tape, it seems.
Oui, bonjour Sophie, je t'appelle parce que j'aurais eu besoin de savoir si tu pouvais t'occuper du
Corinne has
camion,
much to do. Preparations are underway for her first exhibition. Her speciality, designing wallpaper, which she produces here in her workshop. She launched her business last May after an accident that ended her career as a set designer.
For the first time ever, I'm showing my own patterns. Before then, I was working for others, and now I work for myself. It's really challenging.
Corinne is resourceful, taking patterns designed by her great-grandmother at the beginning of the last century. She transforms them into hip designs by using retro colours from the 1950s. She uses a stencil and works on demand, but it's a technique that takes time, up to 2 hours to produce just 1 square metre. And our designer says there's nothing like producing craftsmanship.
If you use digital wallpaper, you just get a giant photocopy. There's no way you can make a mistake. There's no room for the imagination. You can't look at the drawing and say, oh, this shape sort of looks quite like a little man. It's boring, or at least I get bored.
Corinne has been living in Marseille for 12 years. She belongs to those who arrive with the high-speed train, as the locals call them. It's a city she feels at home.
What I like here is the light, the architecture, the different communities, and how easy it is to travel to Paris as a tourist. It's really wonderful to go back to the city you were born in, but this time not as a resident.
In Marseille, Corinne also found love. Almost every day she joins her boyfriend Marc for lunch. They're both self-employed, a situation that's not always easy. Corinne would like to see the next president reform taxes.
With my new job, I'm now self-employed. This status isn't bad in terms of taxes, but you are a CEO when you start your own business. But it's a pity because you can't access unemployment benefits, and you have to pay taxes at a precise date. Even hiring people is very difficult.
It's a fresh start for Corinne. She still can't live solely from the income of her wallpaper designs, but she's getting more customers each day while attracting increasing media attention, all of which bodes well for a fledgling business.
That brings us to the end of Campaign Chronicles. That's it for this week. Don't forget to check out the show's Facebook page and indeed to tell us what you think. Of course, the programme is back at the same time, same place next week. Bye for now.